Hi, my name is Frenly Schaefer Lister, and I am the granddaughter of Christine Gump, who lived in the stone home at 2145 Queen City Avenue. And this is my daughter, Christy, and we're going to share a story that my grandmother shared with me about two goats. My uncle had two goats, and they got away one time, and they stopped the train, and the conductors and the engineers could not get the goats off the track. And so my grandmother, Christine Gump, was a writer, and she wrote a story about that. And my daughter, Christy, who's namesake after my grandma, Christine, is going to read this story.
Mr. Watson.
The story is called Greener Pastures, a true story of two little white goats. Nanny and Nellie were two white goats feeding on the grass side by side. "I'm so tired of being in this one place," said Nellie. "Look over there, Nanny, across the fence. See those tender young shoots? I know they would taste so good. I wish we could get through. Don't you, Nanny?" "Oh, I don't know, Nellie. This goes down pretty good," said Nanny. "Under these trees, the grass isn't so dry, and besides, a terrible dog or those bad boys who throw stones at us. You remember? You better come on and not think about it. You'll only come to grief." Now, what would our little Master Ray say if he could not find us this evening? Nanny went on feeding here and there. Now she found a green apple and was munching away on it, when Nellie came up close and said, "Come, Nanny, I found a place where we can only get our horns through. It is a little gully where the rain washed the ground away. Now don't say no, be a good sport. We will come back again." Nanny walked very slowly, sniffing and lifting her head every once in a while to smell a trace of those naughty boys or the barking dogs. All was so quiet and serene on the hillside this hot July day, and when they came to the place Nellie designated, Nanny hesitated at first, but after a moment, she put her horns under the fence and pushed, and finally both little goats were through. It was such fun being on their own in this strange pasture, nibbling here and there. After a while, they rested under a hawthorn tree. But Nellie was restless in a few minutes and started up the hill a little further. Soon they came to a peculiar walk with little iron rails on both sides of it. "Oh, look, Nanny, what a funny walk," called Nellie. "Let us try it out." What a grand adventure. But Nanny was a little wary. She tossed her head high and looked very carefully all around, but nothing could be seen except the ribbon of rails for a long space between the bushes. The two foolish goats set out to walk on the strange path of wooden ties running crosswise and cinders in between. After a while, the space between the trees was vacant, and they could see the grass underneath, and they were having a great time picking their way. But the grass below seemed to be getting further and further away, and they stopped to look around. Presently, they were very much startled by a hissing sound they could not understand. Then they heard a great rambling. Nanny said, "I think we had better start back, Nellie." But they could not go back, for there was a terrible monster snorting and clanging coming right at them. Nellie became alarmed, for this was worse than barking dogs or bad boys had ever been. But Nanny said, Now don't be frightened and lose your head, Nellie." They looked in every direction, raised their heads high, but there seemed no escape. They looked down, but there was no good. They could never jump such a distance. They went toward the great monster, and with their heads lowered, met it, thinking they could butt it out of their way. But then the monster blew out a great stream of smoke, and the goats could not see, and it shrieked at them.
And
a man looked out of the little windows and screamed at Nanny and Nellie. The goats looked at each other and looked up and down and did not know what to do. So they walked slowly, turned about, and walked daintily forward, sniffing the air, showing their annoyance. Then they stopped there far below them it's hard to read. Far below them was a house and a barn, and wondered how they could get there. But the awful monster came along, clanging and snorting. So once more the goats started to walk carefully and slowly, tossing their heads from side to side, stopping to look down as though contemplating to jump. But every time they stopped, the black monster would rush at them. Finally, they came to a place where the cinders were between the wooden ties again, and then the monster stopped, and two men got down off it and drove them over the trestle with brooms. And when they were safely over, there stood their master Ray, who grabbed them by their collar and held them securely until the fierce monster passed by, and much fuss and cheering. Master Ray said as he patted them, "You poor little goats, suppose that train would have run you over you."
Thanks, Ben. Then like a city.
For they had never seen so many people. Men waved their hats from the windows, and everyone laughed and shouted, and they were glad that the brave but naughty goats were unharmed. Nanny and Nellie were so glad when they came back to their own home and never once even looked at the grass on the other side of the fence. Christine Gump.
And that was probably written around, I would say, 1935 to 1940. So, yeah, it's in cursive, so it's very hard to read.
Cursive, and it's blotted and it's difficult to read. So,
Yeah.